So I would like to invite the fellows to come and join me here for a Q&A. So please come up. While they come here, so what is your takeaway? What is your first word that comes to mind to what you heard? There's a lot of information to take in. Anyone wants to share any thoughts? What comes to mind? Fun. Say again? Fun. Fun. Yeah? Fun. What else? You can do this.
You can see a very diverse, multidisciplinary collaboration.
Very diverse, multidisciplinary collaboration. One more. Fun, multidisciplinary collaboration, and what else do you see or hear? Go ahead. Inclusivity. Yeah. Would you agree? Yeah? So before I kind of hand it over to you guys again, kind of maybe my question to you, because this has been amazing, and for me to see this, because I'm not classically trained as a designer. I just kind of became a designer in my old age. So for me, having the opportunity to see all of you present what you do with your backgrounds, it makes me, actually, the word that I was thinking about was optimism, you know? Because when I hear you talk, I believe that we will have a good world going forward if we have enough of you working on these solutions. And so my question maybe to all of you in the beginning is, why design? What has design to offer? We've talked a lot about AI and technology, and it's all going to be really, really important going forward. But what is it about design that allowed you to do what you do? So if we go with you first, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. Microphone. Yeah, so I mean, I think a really important aspect of design as a method is just like the speculative nature of it. I think we get to kind of look at what exists today and also imagine, how things could be otherwise, and use both what exists today and kind of clearly articulated sets of values to kind of drive that speculation in a grounded way. And I think that's just a really exciting mode to be thinking in, and like you said, gives me a lot of optimism.
Cool.
Yeah, to me, when I think about design, I think of it as like a process or a way of thinking, and I think that's where really the optimism can come through, where a lot of our like training is to think about the why, the how, the what, like why are people doing things, what is going on here, how can we be doing things better, as Jonathan said. And so I think it's that process and way of thinking where the training, doing that for many years over and over, becomes very, very useful and kind of becomes instinctive, where you're just kind of always asking, how could I be doing things better, what exactly is going on, and all of that.
It becomes a part of your DNA. I see that.
I personally use design in my own life, just like making a decision just from my day-to-day.
Justin?
I think building off of that, I think people design every day, whether they consider it design or not. And people engage with design every day, whether it's the doorknob you grab or what you're sitting on, the chairs. But to have the opportunity to sort of hone that intuition in and point it at a problem that's really worth solving is kind of super important and empowering. And like you were saying, optimistic.
Yeah. What is it, maybe just to follow up on this, what is it about design that makes us say things like this, that design is a part of every day? What is it specifically about? Is it the process? Is it the mindset? Is it the both? Is it the daring nature of designers? Or to you, what is it that makes you see design as, and you mentioned it too, it's a part of your everyday life. What is it specifically, you think?
I mean, I think it is that range of possibility that you can have to sort of alter something and make it more specific to yourself or to somebody else.
Yeah.
And kind of, the range of possibilities that people can kind of have the effect on their environment, I think is super important.
Yeah. And one size fits all is not a part of that equation. What I could hear over and over again through your presentations. Thank you. So.
Oh goodness, I think they already did such a great job answering. Let me think of something clever to say.
Yeah. Pressure's on.
I think I really like what all three of them said, because I think sort of a designer mindset to me is, you're just situated in a place of like what could be, right? And maybe even more strongly like what ought to be. I think, we're often trying to develop or design artifacts, and artifacts can be enormously powerful things because they're implicitly encoding a set of values. And then when those artifacts go out into the real world, they have an effect, right? Whether that's in the uptake of those artifacts, in which case then your values are getting propagated, or in the effects that those artifacts have in society. Yeah.
Yeah. No, great. Maria.
Yes, and it gets harder.
I know,
as
it's
you go. Thanks
not
a lot,
fair,
Arvind. I
Sheila. The
appreciate
pressure will be
So,
all on you.
but so I will add, I think these are wonderful. And I think for me, the exciting part of design, in addition to everything that's been said, is really the people part.
Yeah.
I'm a human-centered design person. And I think the opportunity to understand people's needs and thinking about how you can fix them or address them is such a powerful thing. It makes it very motivating, a social impact, all that. So I think that's exciting.
That's a way to live a life.
Yeah.
It's the optimism, having that empowerment just from within. Absolutely. To be able to actually do something about something. That's what I hear like over and over again in your presentations. You just decided to do something about it, which I love. Perfect. Sheila.
Well, this is kind of funny because I actually am a designer. Let's see. I think that the Morningside Design Academy is, as John said, trying to elevate design. And so you might ask, well, what does that mean? Do we want to rarefy it? Of course not. But I think we want to open it up as a methodology that's accessible across disciplines, right? For scientists, for musicians, for engineers, for everyone. And so that is a process of kind of opening up and showing people what's possible by espousing these ways of thinking, right? Ways of critical thinking. Because I'll just answer this as briefly as I can, but in today's world, we have a number of big challenges that everybody is aware of, climate being one, maybe the prevalence of clients, let's call them, for institutions like MIT that are large corporations. And the last thing that we want is engineers or scientists or professionals of any sort who would just blindly do what a powerful company asks them to do. And of course, with AI, that's even more apparent, but there are many other things. So this capacity for critical reflection and for iteration, for prototyping, like you're saying, is very important. It never has been more important. I would just add that it's the same, but within design education and the Department of Architecture and the School of Architecture and Planning, where we have been working with these design methodologies for a long time. In fact, MIT is the first and oldest school of architecture in this country. We have a slightly different challenge. We don't need to necessarily elevate or make visible design because it already exists. It's what we're doing. But we do need to think about how to implement design education, make it relevant, and in some ways make it real. So we need all of our abilities and expertise to anticipate problems that might occur in making something like a pop-up kitchen, and then try to solve for those before they occur, so that we have a better chance of being successful in that implementation or realization. So I think that the way in which design education itself is unfolding is changing.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Maybe you just take it. So now the pressure is on you. Any burning questions you have? What do you think? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question.
There's a mic coming your way.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Jana. Thank you very much for your talk. It was very inspiring to see somebody talk about generative design. It's the topic of my PhD research, so I'm very committed to that. At the end of your talk, you mentioned that we as designers have to account for biases in our work, or as it had been put, the encoding of a set of values in an artifact. So I wonder how you understand generative design as a possibility to critically engage with this encoding of these values in an artifact. So how can generative design as a design process compared to other ways of design help you, to negotiate these biases that you produce as a designer willingly or unwillingly? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I'm also committed to generative design. That is also my PhD dissertation. But yeah, I think what the generative design tool is capable of doing is really, and I see this over and over again, where it gives you a set of results where you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Like it switches the way you were thinking about things, or maybe showing you certain designs that you didn't consider exploring before. Or oftentimes where it shows that maybe your assumptions were incorrect. Like you do know maybe the set of constraints, and you think, oh, it's probably going to look like this. And then all the designs that come out actually are like the opposite shape. And then you realize, oh, these constraints that I have are affecting the geometry in different ways than I thought it would. And so it has that ability to, that learning ability that I talked about, to really kind of showcase how the things are different than your own assumptions. That's number one. And I think number two also is, the more you use this and the more you understand how the tools work and how they could be used creatively, the more you'll start to try to explore different avenues. So you'd start to say, like, okay, these are the designs that I've looked at. I think if I try to map all of these, I notice there's a spot that's missing. And so I'll have more time when I'm doing design, where a lot of the task of trying to create these geometries gets lifted from the designer into this generative design tool. You have that time to try to think more critically about what have I explored and what have I not explored. And so trying to extend beyond your own assumptions and your own biases.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Go ahead. The mic is traveling.
Hi, thank you all for your presentations. I just want to ask something it's been on my mind lately, that I've just come off fresh from like 2 space weeks, one at Harvard, one at MIT. And they recently announced, I think, London announced a tender to build a nuclear reactor on the moon, And my first reaction was just like my gut kind of crumbled inwards. And, and I'm sure that it's like, just extremely exciting technological problem. And, that the kind of techno-optimism is so ripe here at MIT. And we think so much about design education as equipping people with the tools and the skill sets to go out and create. And sometimes I think actually that there is merit in stopping and staying with the trouble and staying with that horrible feeling, and saying, we won't. We choose not to design, and we choose to sort of have a moratorium. And I wonder to some extent, what about design education's responsibility to enable designers to develop that kind of intuition that says we're choosing not to?
What an interesting question.
Yeah, that is a super big technological challenge if that's on the moon with that gravity. Anyway, I think your question is a great one. Thank you for it. I think it's a question that gives us a kind of time to reflect that it's not about doing more and more. And I was simply going to point you to some reading on degrowth, which you might be familiar with. But just in a nutshell, the movement around degrowth actually started with some papers and thoughts in the Netherlands. Actually, it has a history before that, but it became popular right around the time of the pandemic. And Andreas Malm and others have written that reminded us that degrowth is not no growth. It's not designing nothing. It's choosing which of our institutions, which of our aspects and projects are most in need of growth, and putting our design effort or our focus there. And choosing, conversely, to slow down or stop or refuse to design for institutions, and this is classically in the degrowth theory, that's classically large banks, corporations and other things like that, that are already amply grown and are insisting on more and more growth as a measure of success. So sometimes you think degrowth is nothing, but it's not. It's actually choosing really carefully for whom and how and what materials you use when you do choose to design.
Yeah. So actually, just to add on that, I think one of the things that is related to this about education in general is the fact that having the ability to think critically, to your point, I really appreciate your question, because I think one of the things that designer does naturally is to really think critically, because we have to draw on all these different knowledge bases, if you will. We have to work across disciplines, as you all demonstrate. So having the ability to actually make a decision, actually having the ability to make a choice, I think that, to me, is one of the biggest benefits of everybody having that access to educational learning, to design learning, because it, to me, is not about the artifact. It is actually about the decision making. Because as you design, you make million little decisions every day, all day. Okay? Next one. There we go.
Thank you all for your presentations. In practice, I think one of the things I've found the most frustrating with design is that using the results of your exploration to completely circle back and reframe the problem is very rarely planned for, supported, funded, anything. I just haven't found, whether working in government or corporation, academia, I haven't come to a place yet where that's really built in as part of the design process. So I'm curious to know what each of your experiences has been as you go through your own version of the design process. How has it brought you to maybe realize, we're asking the wrong question entirely? And then the second part is something that's on my mind right now is also, I call myself a reformed engineer because engineering is we build it because we can, and design is but should we? And so how do you map for the adjacent consequences, and how do you map for potential harm? As you learn more about the space and going forward, do you have frameworks, do you have processes to navigate that?
Who wants to go first?
I can take a stab at that last part. So in terms of frameworks, I think there's one that I personally use and I find very helpful is the Design Justice Network which has this framework of design justice principles of, again, asking those questions of what are the impacts of that I'm designing? Should I even be designing this? Who am I including in the design process? How am I including them? Are they being included meaningfully, or am I just kind of talking to them at the beginning, leaving them and going designing in my lab, and then just showing them or not at the end what I'm doing. So I think those are all things where, like Svafa said in the beginning, the last question is they should also be embedded in our education, right? So you should really be kind of having this design curriculum where you're taught to question, you're taught to think periodically, not just at the beginning or the end, so that you're kind of avoiding the problem where you're saying, I went through the whole design process, and now at the end, should I loop back to the beginning? You should actually be doing this at every stage so that you're not waiting till the very end. And then at that point, it's a sunk cost where you think, it's too late, I'm just moving on, I'm gonna make the thing. It's just, and I think that's the experiences, especially in industry where you're just at that stage where you've put in too much money, you've put in too much time, you have deadlines, you have to make the thing. Yeah. And so making sure that you're actually doing that at every stage of the process is super important, and using frameworks like the Design Justice framework to be able to do that.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Yeah, I really appreciate the shout to design justice. I also think there's actually a lot of resonance between this question and the previous one, where often these questions are questions of values and misalignments in values between designers and the people that designs affects, and then the use of power in kind of resolving these conflicts, right? Sometimes when you're a designer and you realize that you were asking the wrong question in the beginning, sometimes that's the result of like a process of discovery, and that's very important. And sometimes it was like very clear to everyone else that you were asking the wrong question the whole time, right? And you know, it just took a long time to kind of maybe notice. And so I think that's kind of part of why like co-design is a very important part of you know, my methodological toolkit, where you know, designers are collaborating with people from the communities or the populations that their designs are meant for, right? And when you set out to design something and someone is telling you that maybe that's not the right thing to design, and you have the option to ignore them, that's power, right? And I think, you know, it's very important for designers to kind of be attendant to like these situations in which they hold a lot of power over like the things that get built. And kind of conversely, you know, I think like within the contexts of like large corporations, I think I'm very like interested in the collective power of, you know, people who work as designers in these contexts to, you know, exert influence over design directives that come down from above, that are kind of driven by the profit motive, right? Like I've been very inspired by kind of the labor movement in the tech industry and things like, you know, no tech for ICE, where software engineers are kind of refusing to build software that will be, you know, deployed at the border for cruel purposes, right? So, yeah, I think that's something that should really be incorporated into people's like design learning journey at an early stage, because it's kind of important in any kind of real like social context.
Actually, part of your question was about the environment in which people can actually behave the way we want them to behave, to have the power to iterate, have the power to make a choice. So maybe I can ask some of the advisors on that. So how do we create an environment, maybe in corporate, maybe in academia, where we feel empowered to iterate and we have the time and we have the choice? How do we do that? Maybe Art, if you, it's a tough one. How do we create the environment to design solutions? Let's phrase it like that.
I mean, for me, it's sort of thinking about what the incentives are, right? So I'm just going to focus on the context that I know, which is sort of the academic context, right? And in computer science in particular, and in the field that Jonathan and I work in, which is human-computer interaction, there's often a lot of not necessarily pressure, but you look around and everyone is publishing at a really fast pace, right? Because there's so many exciting design questions to ask, right? Every day I open Twitter and I discover ChatGPT is able to do something new because someone discovered it, right? And so I think all of that sort of excitement and activity can cause a sense of pressure where we feel like we just got to get that thing out. Right? And if you feel that pressure that you got to get that thing out, I think it makes it difficult to pause and go, wait a minute, like, is this the thing I should be doing? Right? Is, you know, maybe I did ask that question. Should I continue to work on that question, or things like that? And at least in my little research community, I see my role as trying to really depressurize that and change the incentive structures for members of our research group, where the way we measure our success is not, you know, and oftentimes there's a temptation in research papers to say, we're the first to do this thing, right? And I don't really want us in our research group to prioritize being the first at producing something, but I want us to be the set of folks who are designing something where we've learned something meaningful, or we've really helped advance the conversation in a meaningful way, or something like that. So I think, you know, the way I think about it is really changing those incentive structures a little bit.
So I'm a design process person. I think about product design and development process and how all those sorts of steps. I think for your question, I agree with what John and I, she said some of the things that I would probably mention. I think the other two things are the most dangerous thing out there for anybody is to have one idea, because all of a sudden that idea looks awesome. You know, that's the idea I'm going to go with. So if you have a lot of ideas and of varying quality or whatever, you don't feel trapped by that one idea. And that's very hard, because there's a phrase, don't marry your first idea. But that's what people do. They're like, oh, this is great, looks good, I'm going to go with it. And they discover halfway through the process it was not a good idea. So you have to have a backup plan always. That's one. And be open. And then the other is to have lots of off-ramps through the process. So like agile development for software is getting more used in physical product development, but it's the idea that like you have a sprint and you accept that maybe it's not going to be okay, and you can let the idea go and you go on to the next one, and you build it into the process so it's part of the culture. So you're not too attached to the idea. You're willing to let it go. Not all companies do that, but if you have that sort of ability, then you can let go.
I very much agree. I agree with that. And just building on what Maria is saying, the idea that don't marry your first idea. In today's world of efficiency, and I think Jonathan, you speaking to this as well, but it's hard sometimes for professionals and for students to slow down and to actually put forward many ideas, right? They get stuck on one idea, they have to pump something out the night before class or something, and one idea comes out. And it's hard to sometimes encourage people to step back and to really like loosen up, to sketch, to try to examine several different ideas, not because one is bad, but you don't know. The design is a discovery process, and you really don't know what you will end up, where you will end up, unless you go through that process, as I'm sure you're aware. So unlike other things like math, which can be elegantly solved and things like that, design, you actually sort of need to do it to produce new knowledge. So there's that act of actually making, drawing many times, iterating, and it's actually challenging to communicate as an educator why that could be important and why it's valuable. The other thing that that wasn't yet said that I think I could add is that design is a form of practice. It's a form of mental practice. It's critical thinking, as others have said, but it's also the ability to kind of exercise your imagination. And that sounds so corny. It sounds like everybody does this, and what is she saying? But I actually believe that our limitations collectively are very much being eroded by all sorts of scripting and kind of call and response type of things that we see in media, on television, and many other places. So to actually have that free, open mind and that agility to not get stuck on one idea, but to look at a range of different ideas and then assess them is a way of practicing one's design imagination. And eventually, with a lot of practice, you become quite expert at imagining things. And that's really, really a power. To me, that's one of the biggest powers of the power of the architectural imagination, because I'm an architect, but also the power of the design imagination.
Wonderful. So unfortunately, I think our time is up, but we have 1 minute left. Do we have one more? One final one before I move on? No? There's one. Okay, go ahead.
So I think I want to build upon the last question that Sheila just mentioned about. I want to build upon kind of the last comment, Sheila, you mentioned about kind of reimagination, right? I think as a designer or as a professional, we reimagine ourselves. How do we get other people, right, to either accept the idea or reimagine with us? Kind of maybe some technique or methodology you guys using, you feel very effective to bring that become a movement versus a single walk. Right?
Okay. Fellows, do you want to talk to that?
Sure.
Go ahead, Jess.
Sort of the question, if I could reiterate, is just inviting others to design with you, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Right, but you can invite others, doesn't mean it will be effective, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you will accept, right? Some of the things you have used, which you thought that was effective and worked very well, especially you reimagine something which could be very different from what's the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's a degrowth or extreme affordable design, depends on what the school of thought you, right? And you try to do something, you want to bring people along, whether against you or with you, right? How do you make that effective?
For sure. I think some of it's a little bit of ego and perspective, knowing that you have a set of skills that you can use to communicate something or design something or push something further. But having bringing others along with you in that process is super important, and also a way to sort of stop and reflect, like the question that was asked before, allowing the voices to come in and really feel like you're not coming to somebody with just a finished product and just say, hey, like, approve this so I can say that I talked to you, you know, but like bringing them in from the ground up and moving along with them and giving them a sense of agency, I think is super important. and just makes the whole process easier as well, and makes the product at the end a lot better from the beginning. So just showing just true collaboration with people and showing them that their perspective truly matter and truly helped mold this thing that you end up doing together in a true sense of collective authorship is super important. I think makes that a lot easier.
Good. Can I smuggle one question in, because we need to conclude? To the fellows. Yeah, I know, we're done. So one sentence, each of you. What are you going to do more of now once you've gone through the MAD Fellowship? What is a MAD Fellow going to do more of? And in 30 seconds or less.
I think the MAD Fellowship has propelled me to do more of what I was doing previously. So scaling up and touching more and more people with what I could produce and design, I think.
Okay, excellent. Jana?
I think looking for design in spaces that is not my own. So looking for that interdisciplinary design and how it could inspire me in my own work.
Beautiful. Jonathan?
Well, I think I know what I'm going to do, but I'm really interested to see what next year's fellows are going to do, because I think the best thing about MAD is that it's going to keep going. So.
Absolutely, and we need more of you, and that's why our dear fellow here, colleague, Marion, dear fellow, I made you a fellow, Marion, okay. So, but Marion Cunningham, she's here to announce the new fellows, but before she does, shall we give them a wonderful round of applause? Thank you for your insights.
It's funny to get coaching on pressing the button. So my name is Marion Cunningham, and I am the Associate Director for Administration for MAD, the Morningside Academy for Design. First, I'd like to thank the MIT Museum for allowing us to use the singular venue, and it's an aptly named venue, the Exchange. So I wanted to mention that. Next, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the MIT Climate and Sustainability Consortium for their thematic and financial partnership, for their exemplar partnership. Today's program is entitled Tomorrow's Designer Designing Today. It could also have been entitled Today's Designers Designing for Tomorrow. Because as you have heard, MAD Fellows are not waiting to be engaged. They are already enmeshed with designing for change today. MAD was created with a mission to catalyze transformation by integrating design into the educational and research enterprise, bringing creative, humanistic thinking to society's challenges, and making positive contributions to the world by catalyzing innovation, transforming learning, and empowering society. Our new cohort is poised to add their talents to the MAD mission. The individuals you are going to meet are scholars, artists, educators, multilingual, a zookeeper, and people who have been spurred into action by the gaps in services and knowledge they have witnessed and experienced in healthcare, the automotive industry, education, agriculture, and related to the climate crisis. At our launch event in October, Gerald Chan of the Morningside Foundation said that students use design to navigate the unbounded space, where they learn to explore and create in anticipation of tackling problems in that very unbounded space known as the world. We are delighted to introduce you to the class of 2024 of MAD Fellows. We're going to show you this video. I'm going to push the button, but I wanted to alert you that there is an imperfection in the center of the screen. And so it may be a little skewed in terms of what you see. We want to acknowledge that, but I think you'll be delighted to learn more about our fellows.
The MAD Fellowship provides freedom for graduate students to explore in their areas of passion and to bring their design skills to the world's problems.
I really want to help address one of the pressing issues that our generation is facing, which is climate change.
The crisis of biodiversity is also a crisis of ethnodiversity. We need radically different ways of consuming, producing, and restoring.
I believe that design is able to expand the way that we approach not just our industries and the impacts that we have on the world physically, but literally our relationships to each other, our relationships to the ecosystem, our relationships to the past, to the cosmos, and everything beyond.
Every year, our MAD Fellows tackle a range of challenging problems.
I study floodplain agriculture. My project has two objectives, climate change resilience and food production.
I'm studying nature-based solutions for coastal adaptation, specifically how different configurations of oyster reef restoration strategies influence wave attenuation.
My current PhD project is on designing a new architecture for a high-pressure hydrogen storage tank for CO2 mitigation.
Design has a deep, deep history at MIT as a way of translating technology and creativity into the world.
The project that I'm working on is the connection between how students learn in a technical class and how students apply that knowledge in a project or in their career later on.
I like to say I'm kind of a musician at heart, maybe a designer and an engineer at hand, and a neuroscientist in mind. I build instruments that are a combination between a medical instrument and a musical instrument.
How might we use human-centered design to design last-mile transportation delivery networks that will really enable us to help communities that need it the most?
I want to help astronauts be able to have the tools that they need to solve a medical crisis when a life could be at risk, and I'm hoping to use automation to be that tool.
I'm a graduate architect by profession. We have a lot of interesting tools coming out in the generative AI space, and we could leverage the power of these tools to make architecture more accessible to a lot of different people.
My current project is related to this idea that we can actually control the behavior of a fabricated object by modifying the distribution of material inside of that object. And I'm so excited to learn from everyone else and, different corners of design that I hadn't thought of.
One thing that I'm exploring is using textiles and physical making techniques in order to both reflect on and archive histories within different diasporas.
I don't think a single person can accomplish the whole design by himself or herself.
My approach to design, I sort of like to think of it as a multi-species approach, where it's not just the people living on the coast, but it's the oyster, it's the larval fish, it's the birds.
I generate conditions for two things that would never get to speak in real life to meet and grow generatively.
I feel inspired seeing the amount of resources and support that we get. It really makes me feel hopeful for the world.
We continually come up with solutions to overcome any hurdle that kind of stands in the way of better understanding our world or the universe.
And the MAD Fellowship is really a gift. It's a gift for students to be able to do their work without worrying about where their support will come from. But it's also much more than a gift. It's about building community around design. It's about learning best practices, sharing with each other, and ultimately elevating design across MIT and around the world.
So I'm going to introduce each of the fellows and indicate their department, and with each introduction, they will come up. The first person is James Bryce from Civil and Environmental Engineering in the Department of Architecture. Next, we have Jenny Kane from the School of Management. Sandra Huffman from Mechanical Engineering. Ziyi Liang from Mechanical Engineering. Leanne Makatura from Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Prathama Muniappa from Media Arts and Sciences. Joffrey Nyakangora from the Department of Architecture. Tiandra Ray from Urban Studies and Planning. Alexandra Riguer from Media Arts and Sciences. And the last two fellows who are unable to be here today are Chin Chu from Urban Studies and Planning and Allison Porter from Mechanical Engineering and okay. Allison Porter from the Institute of Medical Engineering and Science. Welcome you and thank you for being a part of the MAD Academy for Design. And next, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Marion. Let's have one last round of applause for our new fellows. And again, we're very excited to see how the torch brightens from last year to this year, and 5 years from now, how this cohort continues to grow and to spread impact in the world. So thank you all so much. And at this point, we're going to close our event. We're going to thank you all for joining. It's really great to be here to celebrate the new cohort, to celebrate this year's cohort. And I want to thank the whole MAD team, especially Adelaide Zollinger, Marion Cunningham, Svafa for doing a fabulous job as our moderator, Maria as our associate director, and also Boston Design Week for giving us a chance to celebrate design and to do it with the broader Boston community. So thank you all for joining, and all the best. And at this point, we'll ask the fellows and their advisors to join us in the Sharp Room so we can have a little family chat. See you there.